Hey everyone, welcome back to another hardware news recap for the week. In this one, we'll be talking about Battlemage appearing again, like Loch Ness, just resurfacing as a monster, breaching the waters. It's another appearance of a potential Battlemage GPU. RDNA5 gets a blank slate design. Now you might be saying, what about RDNA4? And the rumor mill doesn't care about that one. We'll also be talking about NVIDIA potentially working on a handheld gaming device, Lunar Lake being in some Intel-based handheld gaming devices, tariffs increasing, which will likely affect consumer pricing for some electronics, and more. Before that, this video is brought to you by Lian Li and the O11D Evo RGB case. The O11D Evo RGB is an updated entry to the famed O11 lineup, retaining heavy support for fan mounts, drive mount locations, and flexibility on component mounting, such as two options for the power supply. The O11D Evo RGB's dual chamber approach aims to maximize cable storage on the backside to streamline cable management, coupling this with a unique vertical GPU mount to showcase the most expensive part in most systems. Learn more at the link in the description below. Up first, Battlemage appears in a handheld, so Intel slowly working towards a discrete GPU launch of Battlemage. Battlemage is the successor to Alchemist. Alchemist is the namesake of the A in the A750, A770 naming scheme, and this should be a critical moment for the company's GPU business, whether discrete or not initially, because the first generation people are a little more accepting of, okay, they're gonna have to work through some problems, early adopter type situation. The second one's really when Intel needs to hit the ground and have it work, or at least work better than Alchemist did in its most recent state whenever they do launch the discrete GPU. So we don't have dates or many leaks for the discrete GPUs yet, but we do have some more information for the SoCs and future handhelds. So company Weibu is introducing a Lunar Lake gaming handheld device that features an as of yet unnamed Lunar Lake SoC, at least at the time of writing the story, and it will have theoretically a Battlemage GPU in it. PC World identified this handheld when it was looking for Computex booths, and the handheld is pictured, or rendered, you can't tell anymore, with a large screen centrally and two controllers that look like a growth on the side of the tablet. It's definitely not as molded in as some of the other devices. The device is called the GP10. It'll use a gargantuan 10.95-inch display at 1920 by 1200, runs 120 Hz, it has LPDDR5X up to 64 gigabytes, a 2280 NVMe M.2 slot, and an undefined Lunar Lake SoC. The current rumors point toward a new CPU architecture and of course, the new GPU architecture strapped to that. That would be the Xe2 LPG solution for Lunar Lake, and these SoCs will be used in mobile devices as well as handheld gaming devices. As a quick reminder, handheld gaming currently is largely dominated by the Nintendo Switch. You've got NVIDIA, it's older, and then in basically everything else that's a PC, it's mostly AMD. There's a couple Intel devices out there. The MSI Claw is maybe the most recent and most famous one, but it's not good. It's that simple. You just shouldn't buy it. So Intel has a lot to prove in handheld. One of the biggest ongoing concerns within the audience for purchasing Intel GPUs has historically been, regardless of how much more they improve the drivers, is Intel going to keep supporting this thing? Because like Google, Intel also has a graveyard of things that it has abandoned over the years, and that's going to affect consumer confidence. So maybe the one point to that we'd bring up is that Intel most recently in its last keynote that we covered really was focusing on AI, and whatever you think of the two buzz letters forming the combined buzzword, as it were, the important part is that Intel is investing seriously in GPUs for enterprise and business customers, and so if it ever wants to have any chance of success with them, it's going to need a stable platform. The architecture is, at least in many ways, shared, or at least the learnings are definitely shared. And so maybe that's some indication that Intel may stick with the gaming GPUs, maybe longer term than you might have initially expected at the launch of Arc Alchemist. We'll see, of course, how it works out. But as picky as enthusiasts are, certainly the data center and enterprise clients who are spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on solutions are going to be a lot pickier and a lot less tolerant of problems. So gaming's a good place to try things out. That's what NVIDIA did. Speaking of Lunar Lake, though, there was also a related rumor to this, or not even a rumor, it's just a straight up, it's just news. A new official commit was spotted from Intel by Inst LATX64, which we found via video cards. This notes the existence of an Intel Core Ultra 5 238V. That's right, it's going to run on 238 volts. This follows the 234 volt CPU. I'm assuming it's volts. It's actually not indicated, but we like to use context clues for our reporting here. It's an advanced form of deductive reasoning. And the context clues for this, you think about it, and Intel really likes voltage. So the motherboard vendors, for example, will commonly blast the CPUs with additional voltage. It's not because they don't tune it and they run it at stupid settings. It's because, moving on, I'm being told that 238V is not actually indicative of the voltage the CPU will run at. There's no news here beyond the existence of this SKU, so let's move on again. It's the recursive moving on to the next story, just like there's the recursive announcements that we announced last week when Nintendo announced the announcement. I swear it's going to be in a future book of tongue twisters. Up next, RDNA GPUs from AMD. So RDNA 4 isn't even out yet, but it's time to move on from RDNA 4 and look instead towards the future, which is RDNA 5. Hardware leaker WJM47196, which is probably the name of the next Intel product, took to the ChipHell forums and, in translation, posted to videocards.com, was describing RDNA 4 as, quote, merely a bug fix for RDNA 3, so its performance is still as expected, at best comparable to the 79XT, end quote. The leaker did, however, add that, quote, there's still an improvement in ray tracing. WJM47196 elaborated, quote, RDNA 3 actually didn't meet its performance expectations, resulting in the big core frequency power curve going out of control. This includes, but is not limited to, conducting on-chip interconnect verification for the MI series and sharing R&D costs. If you don't follow it, MI is AMD's Radeon Instinct lineup. That is for the non-gaming markets, for the professional market. Finally, the leaker continued via translation, quote, RDNA 5 will be a clean sheet design similar to the Zen series. It might even get a name change, though this isn't certain yet. Hence, there's a need to widen the gap from RDNA 4 to thoroughly conduct case studies and R&D. This is actually something I was just talking with Jeremy on the team about, which is the naming of AMD products over the years. So you look at it, and AMD's been really disjointed. NVIDIA's really only had one massive name change in recent times, which was GTX to RTX. And for the most part, they've stuck with the 1000 series naming. There have been a few kind of, Titan cards get a different name, like Titan V, but generally NVIDIA's been mostly consistent. AMD has changed a lot over the years. They've gone from hundreds naming, well, it was HD thousands to hundreds. They've kind of switched in RX and R number over the years. They've had random drop-ins of names like Fury, Fury X, Vega 5664, and that was the big announcement of the time, was that Vega was going to be named Vega, and then moving back into the thousands now after an extended run of hundreds and then just straight up words for names. So another name change, I don't know, we look at it kind of two ways. Of course, the foundation here is that it's just the name, who cares to some extent. But it really does matter from a consumer awareness and like not being confused as hell standpoint if you look at Intel's naming over the years. And in this instance, if AMD does a major name change, when I was talking with Jeremy, he said he thinks they might have to get rid of Radeon. And thinking about it, I don't really disagree with that. I mean, the name, out of all of the parts, that's the one that means the least, and is potentially also plagued with years of now mostly resolved things like driver issues, and that may be where they need to reset. But part of the risk of these frequent name changes that AMD does is it does lead to confusion. So whatever they do next, it's going to need to be really unified, and their marketing efforts to, if there's a new major architecture, they need to signify that somehow. The naming helps. But then if it's a flop or it's not as good or whatever, it's only going to serve to hurt the product. So they have to be really careful with that. All right, enough of the random talking about industry thoughts. Next one, NVIDIA Blackwell AI hardware. It's going to be expensive. That's the news. AI hardware costs lots of AI money.
And now I realize it's too much.
Kind of has a certain dystopian ring to it. That'll be the title of my next book. And by next, I mean first. And by first, I mean
artificial intelligence.
Maybe I'll have ChatGPT write it. Anyway, some naming clarification here. So GB200, when it features the G, it's got the gray CPUs. That was when it started to kind of emerge when NVIDIA was trying to purchase ARM. So that gray CPU is an ARM-powered device. It's coupled with, in some instances here, multiple GPUs. So GB200 has 2 GPU solutions with the gray CPU. And then the server rack systems, NVL36, NVL72. It's just varying configurations of how many of these so-called super chips are in the complete server solution, which is where it gets interesting, because we talked about this in the NVIDIA is on another planet video we did, where NVIDIA is moving into space of really trying to be a complete solution provider, which is what every company gets obsessed with at some point. But in NVIDIA's case, it really goes a lot deeper than you might see with, say, Corsair. Corsair also is obsessed with this concept of ecosystems. The difference is Corsair doesn't make any of the designs for the silicon products that ultimately end up in those, because they're still using Intel, AMD, NVIDIA at some level. So NVIDIA is fairly close to the actual source of production here. And that means that maybe through some deployment partners, I'm sure HP and Dell still get play in this territory, but through them, you'll see NVIDIA deployments, but otherwise, NVIDIA itself is trying to ship relatively complete solutions now, beckoning back to when Jensen pointed at the, by his account, very heavy, which is apparently an important metric.
Everything I'm showing today are very heavy. This is 60 pounds, 65 pounds.
In fact, the obsession with heavy goes pretty deep.
4 elephants. 1 GPU.
It's clear that NVIDIA is trying. It's actually not too clear, the elephants thing. I think that's just a weird obsession. And Intel does the same reference. But it's mostly clear that they're going for selling complete solutions, which is a big change, and especially coupled with their software developments, where it's almost impossible to avoid NVIDIA if you're in the world of AI. The roads all kind of point there one way or another. Anyway, Tom's Hardware noted that NVIDIA's current H200 GPUs cost upwards of 40 grand for some reference, and these are just estimates at the moment for the new stuff, because NVIDIA has yet to reveal official pricing. We're not experts in the field of AI hardware, so we don't really have any ability to vet what a bank is saying about the potential pricing and estimates. All right, next one. Nintendo Switch successor leaks. Following the Nintendo Switch 2 announcement that we announced when we announced their announcement in the last episode, announcement. It's actually just an episode, but I felt like I should probably say it one more time. So following that up, Family Board's member LIC claims to have details from shipment listings and wrote, quote, the console has 12 gigabytes of RAM from 2 6GB 7500 megatransfer per second LPDDR5 or 5X, it's unclear, modules. The internal storage is 256 gigabytes of UFS 3.1, end quote. If this is true, that would be 3 times the amount of memory in the original Switch, which is 4 gigabytes of LPDDR4. CentroLeaks also reports that the Switch Successor will have a built-in microphone, which the original Switch lacked. CentroLeaks also tweeted that its screen will be, quote, 8 inches. If this is true, that would have it 1 inch larger than the Switch OLED screen. And for context, the original Switch features a 6.2-inch display, and the Steam Deck OLED, the newer one, has a 7.4-inch display. And then finally, Brazilian streamer TVPH says he has a source that indicates the Switch Successor will be backwards compatible with the original, and that Nintendo is aiming to launch its new console in March of 2025. Up next, the US government is increasing its tariffs on Chinese-made products. As just the general reminder, we stay away from the political commentary on these types of stories and focus on just the news. So that's what we're going to do for you. Now, according to Reuters, quote, the new measures affect $18 billion in imported Chinese goods, including steel and aluminum, semiconductors, electric vehicles, solar cells, and cranes, end quote. EVs in particular are seeing the most dramatic spike, with the publication writing that there will be a, quote, quadrupling of EV duties to over 100%. Reuters notes that these spikes also double, quote, the duties on semiconductor tariffs to 50%. Now, for our industry, the semiconductor tariffs are the most likely to affect pricing or be seen in the consumer market. As general context, CPU and GPU solutions are made all over the world, but for the most part, the silicon will come from typically either TSMC or Intel. There's a couple other foundries around the world, but for the types of hardware we cover, it's really just going to be those two for a CPU or a GPU for the most part. So TSMC is entirely based in Taiwan right now. They're building a US-based factory. This would, as we understand it, not be affected by these tariffs. They would have their own different trade agreements with the US or restrictions or tariffs. And then Intel is all over the place, but they have a massive fabrication facility in the US. Arizona is building out a mega fab. Ohio and a couple of other places have fabs as well. Oregon. And then they also have locations around the world. So those would not be affected by this. What would be affected might be things like, say, maybe MOSFETs or other supply like that comes directly out of China and the factories there. But there's some other news on what's impacted. So Reuters writes about that, saying, quote, more tariffs will follow in 2025 and 2026 on semiconductors, as well as lithium-ion batteries that are not used in electric vehicles. So that's kind of the interesting point, because that would affect laptop pricing, handhelds. A lot of those batteries do, in fact, have the made in China stamp on them. Now, regardless of the political side, because again, as policy, we don't talk about that, the likely outcome of this is that anyone who is still bringing products in that are affected by these tariffs increases will pass that price on to the consumer in some fashion. And we saw this with cases a number of years ago, computer cases, where almost overnight some of the cheapest cases on the market either evaporated or had their prices increased to a point it really didn't make sense. So within the PC industry over the years, we've seen an uptick in manufacturing moving to places like Taiwan and to Vietnam especially, where the hardware vendors are trying to keep their factories geographically close to the supply of their suppliers. It's not an announcement, recursive thing, it's like an actual thing, while also still keeping the manufacturing labor cost low. Factually speaking, those would typically be the reasons, along with real estate and things of that nature, because ultimately a lot of the suppliers of things like raw metals, raw materials that may go to a MOSFET or an inductor factory, those are also based in China. So being nearby to those is maybe the reason they keep it in neighboring countries while still being able to dodge those tariffs. So that's kind of the move in the PC industry, and we're going to move to the next story now. Financial analyst Dan Neistat recently tweeted that, quote, MediaTek is working with NVIDIA to co-develop an ARM-based AI processor for personal computers. According to Neistat, the design is, quote, to be finalized in the third quarter with verification in the fourth quarter. This processor is expected to cost as much as $300 and, quote, is expected to become a major part of MediaTek's business. TSMC is expected to manufacture the chip on 3 nanometers in the first half of 2025 with CoWoS packaging on the back end. In reply to this tweet, and this is an interesting part, leaker X, we're going to go with XP GPU, wrote, quote, yep, and MediaTek is also working on gaming handheld SoC with NVIDIA GPU, as Jensen is frustrated by Nintendo and he sees a good market potential, end quote. No idea what the source for Jensen being frustrated with it is. Funny to think about, but NVIDIA, as a reminder, did kind of make handhelds in the past. So what the hell is it called? I actually liked it. The flip screen and the Android, and then later there was the TV. Shield. That's it, NVIDIA Shield. So they have kind of made one in the past, and this would be a pretty major move, not totally unexpected. You have to wonder if NVIDIA would be looking at this like, damn it, we were a little too early to that market, because the handheld market definitely has captured interest at this moment. Hard to say exactly how big it is, but NVIDIA makes the Tegra SoC that powers the current Nintendo Switch lineup, and is rumored to be the solution for the next Nintendo Switch, whatever that's called. But being an ARM solution presents hurdles with things like x86 game library support. So definitely be following this one because NVIDIA getting back into handhelds would be pretty major news. There's a lot of AMD in it right now, and probably they see an opportunity, especially with Intel getting in there too. So NVIDIA's actually the follower for this one, for that market. Up next, Intel was originally seeking $2 billion to expand its Fab 34 factory in Ireland, but it's now working with Apollo Global Management to secure $11 billion for it. It's always amazing how the large mega corporations operate, where it's like, we just need 5 times more than originally. Tom's Hardware notes that, quote, the companies are expected to finalize their deal in the coming weeks, end quote. And they also said that Fab 34 is, quote, a recent addition to Intel's Ireland campus and that it manufactures the Intel 4 process technology to make compute tiles for Intel's Core Ultra Meteor Lake processors, adding that the fab is the only high-volume semiconductor manufacturer in Europe using extreme ultraviolet or EUV technology for its workflow, end quote. Now, previously, we reported that Intel had regretted not more aggressively investing in EUV machines, which carry higher upfront costs, but end up being more cost-effective in the long run, according to Intel's own CEO, Pat Gelsinger. This investment is a course correction to that predicament, and it piggybacks off of its commitment to spend $100 billion to build and expand factories across the US, Ohio, New Mexico, Oregon, and Arizona. And again, as a reminder, we've been talking about it for like 6 months now on every now and then, but we do have a fab tour of one of those facilities, and the video is actually done from the first pass. So doing accuracy checks, and we're gonna have to do a blurring pass to censor some of the details that they don't want public. It makes sense in this case because it's things like supplier names, formulas, stuff like that. So nothing crazy, but we're working on finalizing that. Really exciting though. It's a massive tour video. It's over an hour long. We have a lot of experts we talk to because I don't know anything about silicon manufacturing beyond like whatever buzzwords you can find on Wikipedia. So it was very educational. Learned a lot from the people we spoke with. We're excited to release it, but not quite there yet. Maybe another month or two and it'll be finalized. All right, next one. Microsoft and Byowave making an accessibility controller. This is kind of a bit of positive news. I hadn't heard of Byowave before this story, but the two announced in the past week that there's a new controller they've developed. It's actually really interesting, even if you don't need it for accessibility purposes. And this is useful for both Xbox and PC. It's called the Proteus. We assume it's named after the ancient Greek god, which could change form, and the name would make sense. The controller uses what Microsoft and Byowave call a snap and play system, which allows custom configurations in somewhat bendable shapes to accommodate different physical needs for the user. Feasibly, you could build this in a way that it could have a complete set of control inputs for one hand. For another example, it could be tuned for left or right-handed use. The product photos show a flat layout with quadrants, a vertical layout, almost like a joystick, and a photo of the same control components being attached. A byproduct of the design is that it can be customized for looks as well, allowing attachments beyond pure function. The kit is currently $255. It includes a left and right analog cube, as they call it, and it also has a left and right trigger peripheral, various other input cubes and half cubes, as you can see in their spec list, and things like spacers. It also has X, Y, A, B face button inputs, a D-pad peripheral, and more. You can build a complete controller with this. Now, clicking on the info icon on each of the spec item names gives some additional detail on photos. So for instance, the half cubes are described as, quote, great when making more unusual configurations, and it appears that these might give an angled joint to which other cubes or faces can be connected. Now, meanwhile, some of the peripherals simply attach to the cubes or half cubes. So XYAB, you can see as an example of this, has an almost bottle cap shaped underside to attach to the cubes. And the whole idea is actually really cool and great that there's something out there for users who need something with an accessibility consideration. And likewise, you could probably make some just pretty interesting layouts with this, or even prototype things in general. Definitely a really cool mechanical engineering project and highly functional iteration of a design where for sure a lot more expensive than kind of a traditional controller that's maybe just got a few molds for the top and underside of the device. You've got some PCBs and buttons to insert in there. So there's a lot more parts individually, which will cost more and probably lower volume manufacturing, more complex process. But we always like seeing advancements in not just underserved markets, but also things like cool mechanical engineering endeavors, which This definitely is. So that's it for hardware news this week. Thanks for watching. As always, you can subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to grab a t-shirt like this one, which is on pre-order right now. And that'll help us out directly. Or patreon.com/gamersnexus if you want to throw us a few bucks regularly to help fund our reporting. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.